Hey guys, got something pretty cool in the mail this week, so I figured that I would share this with you. Do a quick little video on my initial impressions of this. This is the Tactile Archer. So, for those of you unfamiliar with the brand, Tactile is a company based in Texas that was making pens initially, some actually pretty cool pens out of titanium, copper, other metals. I guess their thing was that they were doing these really nice kind of tactile textures in their machining. And then a couple years later, they started getting into knives. And a few years back, I did actually have one of their earlier models, which was called the Rockwall, which was a smaller knife, a little smaller than I preferred, so I ended up selling it, even though it was a pretty nice knife. And this year they released this model, which is definitely a little bit more high-end than the Rockwall was. And it's been on my wish list for a bit, but since it's been fairly pricey and a little bit hard to get, I was not able to pick one up until recently. So pulled the trigger on this over the weekend. Just came in the mail. Carried it for a couple days now, and I have to say overall I'm pretty happy with it. So what you have here is a titanium frame lock flipper with a 3.4-inch MagnaCut blade. MagnaCut that is hardened for 63 to 64 HRC, which is what we all like to hear. It's not a drop one, it's like a straight back kind of blade shape. It's got a lot of belly and a nice pointy tip, which is what I like. The finish on the blade actually kind of reminds me of what you see from like Shirogorov. It's with like a really fine stonewash, not particularly reflective. Actually feels kind of very smooth to the touch. See, it actually does kind of pick up fingerprints somewhat easily, so I'm just going to try not to have them on camera too much. And there's a cutout in there that you can actually use for like a middle finger spidey flick. Handle is titanium with this really, really gorgeous, I guess like a feather pattern machined in. And this is the Knife Center exclusive version, which actually has rich light inlays. Rich light is not a material I've come across before, but apparently it's basically the same thing as like paper micarta, where they're taking like a paper material and they are impregnating it with a resin, and you get this material, which it looks almost like a wood from a distance, but up close you can see that there isn't really a grain to it. But I think it works well with this knife. I may have liked some other inlay materials a little bit more, but I'm not at all disappointed in these. So yeah, what really attracted me to this was actually the machining on the handle. I think it's absolutely gorgeous, and it feels really nice as well. The pivot screw on the show side looks a lot like a nipple. You'll also notice that there is no other hardware visible on the show side, which is pretty cool. Spine says Tactile on it. It's not the most subtle thing, but I would much rather have it here than like printed on the blade. So I do kind of appreciate they put it on the back spacer. And then on the lock side, you see that yes, here we have all the hardware for holding the knife together. A pocket clip that I actually really like. I think it looks cool, but it also works really, really well. As far as machined clips go, the tension on it's perfect. It goes in and out of the pocket really easily, and it's also secure. So kudos to them on this excellent execution of the pocket clip. You can see there's also an inlay here. And this is all titanium T8 hardware. So there's your overview. Overall length of the knife, I didn't even look it up. I know this is a 3.4-inch blade, so probably about 8 inches overall, roughly. I could put down the PM2 next to it for a size comparison, so you see blade length is about the same. overall length of the knife is actually very similar to what the PM2 is. I would have thought it would be just a tad shorter. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm not measuring it just right, but yeah, it is. It is maybe just a smidge shorter than the PM2 is. Yeah, maybe just a fraction. But anyway, so it's very much a medium to large size knife. So action is pretty good, but there is a caveat to that. This thing is super sensitive to having pressure placed on the lock bar when you are deploying it. So if you are gripping this in a way where, you know, your middle finger or something is here on the lock bar, it doesn't want to open. You have to really make sure that your fingers are clear of that lock bar. You know, you have to kind of be cognizant of either placing them on the pocket clip or maybe down here on the cutout. Oops, hit my camera stand. If you want to deploy. So it does really rock it out if you are not squeezing that lock bar, but if you are squeezing it, then you will be unfortunately disappointed in that deployment. So that's probably the biggest nitpick I have about this. I think I would have liked this model more if they had done it as a liner lock. You know, both aesthetically, because this beautiful machining wouldn't be interrupted by the lock bar cutout, and they could have done the same inlays on both sides. It would have made this a much more attractive knife, I think, if it had been done as a liner lock. But also because you wouldn't have this same issue with, you know, that I just mentioned. If it was a liner lock, you wouldn't have the issue with accidentally pressing on the lock bar when deploying it, and you would have a much more consistent action as a result. So I know a lot of people prefer the frame lock. They think it's stronger or more secure than compared to a liner lock, but in my opinion, I don't think that I guess marginal increase in lock strength is worth what you're giving up on this, at least for the aesthetics and the convenience in the action. So again, kind of it is a nitpick, but I don't think that makes this a bad knife in any way. You can also deploy by a quote-unquote spidey flick. You can get your middle finger in here, flick it out just fine. Detent is a little on the heavier side, and again, that's the kind of thing that, you know, that's a matter of personal preference. Some people may like a lighter detent, some like a heavier. I think it's just fine. Another, it's kind of a flaw, and something I noticed pretty soon after I opened the box. I don't know how well it comes out on camera, but in regular lighting, there's actually, you can see here just beneath the pivot screw and maybe a little bit down here as well, the finish on the titanium is a bit lighter or shinier than it is in other places on the handle. So there is a bit of uneven finishing on this. That is a little bit disappointing because this is not a cheap knife. You know, this is a intricately machined USA made product with premium materials, so no, it is not cheap, but you know, all things considered, if you're paying this much, you really want to have, you know, more consistent finishing. At first I thought, well, maybe, you know, there's like some like residue from adhesive from the inlay. No, that is actually just, for whatever reason, that section of the handle has a little bit more of a polish on it than the rest. So kind of a minor blemish, but it's not the kind of thing I'm going to return this over because I'm otherwise very happy with it. And is there anything else about this that I think? No. One thing I did notice is towards the tip on the edge, maybe you can kind of see the way the light's catching it. It was like a little bit rounded off. So again, kind of a minor thing. You know, if you've watched my previous videos, you know that I am a sharpener. I am kind of snobby when it comes to the edges. This one does have a relatively neat looking edge. You notice that the bevel is pretty consistent. It is not like the sharpest out of box, but it is reasonably sharp. You know, it slices paper with ease. It doesn't really have that kind of bite, you know, where it really catches your finger, but I can kind of get it to like catch hairs a little bit. Just the slightest bit, I can feel it catching hairs if I run it across my arm like this. Not pressing against the skin, but just kind of hovering the edge just above the skin. So yeah, I may at some point put my own edge on that just to make it a little sharper, but yeah, right there you can kind of see the light catching it. It is a little bit rounded there, so that the tip is actually a little bit less pointy than it should be. But that's a pretty minor thing. You know, if you're really going to use it, the first time you go through a piece of cardboard, you'd probably end up dulling that tip a little bit anyway. Yeah. Oh, I think one thing I didn't mention is ergonomics. Does actually feel pretty good in hand. Again, this texture is very pleasant, provides good grip, and this machining the surface is actually slightly concave, so the way that your fingers kind of fall onto that, it's pretty nice. This is actually a little slimmer than I expected it to be. You know, you don't typically get a sense for these things when you see photos or videos, but the knife is actually slimmer than I thought it would be in this dimension. And personal preference wise, I tend to like handles to be slightly thicker just because it kind of fills the hand better ergonomic wise. But again, that's just a preference thing. That's not really a flaw. It's still plenty comfortable in hand. You know, ergonomic wise, this probably could get like an 8 out of 10, something like that. So it's not the kind of thing I think anyone would be disappointed in. You could definitely use this comfortably, no issues. Yeah, and this is fun to flick. Not the most fidgety thing, but I don't think anyone would be really disappointed in it. Doesn't really drop shut on the fall, but it almost does. Can't remember if I mentioned before, but I did disassemble this just to put a little bit of oil along the track of the detent ball. Wasn't necessarily, you know, something I needed to do, but it's just something I like to do. Did make it slightly smoother, but you know, I've only had it for 2 days. It may have ended up just getting smoother on its own once it broke in a little bit more. Yeah, this is a really nice offering from Tactile. You know, looking in the kind of similar price range at other USA made stuff, now you're talking about stuff like Chris Reeve or Hinderer or some of the other newer stuff like Machine Wise, maybe even Medford. I think that this can hold, Tactile can kind of hold their own against those other more established or well-known brands at this point. They're doing some really impressive work, and I think that I haven't been following them super closely, but after getting this, I think that I'm going to be taking a little bit more of a close look at some of their other products to maybe add to my collection. Maybe like the Maverick, which is a model that's been out a little bit longer than this, similar size, but it's a crossbar lock. Yeah, we'll see. So anyway, maybe at some point I'll do a full review on this after I've had a little bit longer, seen how it breaks in, carried a little bit more. We'll see. Either way, initial impressions are good, and I think that if you've been interested in this, unless you have a real kind of nitpicky problem with you know, that lock bar pressure issue when you're opening, I don't think you'll be disappointed in this model. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for a review of this in the future.